Good afternoon. Let's do some business. We are doing it live right here, doing more at 4 weekday afternoons. We get right down to business with the news-driven hour right after Ben Shapiro and right before the 790 KBC News Blitz with Randy Wang at 5. Mottek On Money live on the air on 790 KBC, streaming live online worldwide at kbc.com, and your on-demand Mottek On Money podcast, kbc.com, Apple, iTunes, and all your favorite podcast platforms. Get out the ulcer medication. Rough day for the stock market today. Stocks finishing sharply lower, led by a nearly 4% plunge in the NASDAQ after disappointing earnings news from some big tech companies. We saw the Dow finishing lower by more than 500 points, closing lower for the fourth time in the past 5 trading sessions. The S&P 500 gave back 129 points, and that was the worst day on a percentage basis, down 2.3% since December of 2022. The NASDAQ taking a big hit today, down nearly 655 points, down 3.6% on the day. On a percentage basis, the NASDAQ seeing its worst day since October 7th of 2022. The volatility index, the VIX index, Wall Street's so-called fear index, also spiking today and hitting the highest we've seen since April. Market, of course, also digesting the latest news on the political as well as geopolitical front, with former President Trump holding his first rally since President Biden dropped out of the 2024 presidential race. Addressing supporters in North Carolina right now, he's attacked his new opponent, Vice President Kamala Harris, and says President Biden quit the race because he was losing in the polls. President Biden, meanwhile, will address the nation this evening in his first address since his decision to drop out of the 2024 presidential race. Vice President Harris asked for support from women of color during an address at an historically black sorority today. Earlier, thousands of protesters rallied to denounce Israel's war in Gaza, while Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu delivered a scathing speech in Congress to defend Israel's conduct in the war and vowed total victory against Hamas following the Hamas terror attack on Israel back on October 7th. On the earnings front, we see Ford seeing a $1.1 billion loss in its EV business, dragging second quarter profit well below Wall Street analysts' expectations. Shares of Ford slipping into reverse, down more than 10% this afternoon after Ford reported quarterly profits well below Wall Street expectations and notched another billion-dollar loss on its electric vehicles. Tesla, meanwhile, and GM reported their second quarter earnings yesterday. We saw a reaction today. Tesla moving sharply lower today. Shares of the ARK Innovation ETF, the exchange-traded fund run by ARK Investment Management founder Kathy Wood, was tumbling this afternoon. That ETF targets disruptive innovation as an investment theme, in stocks down nearly 5% today. Taking a look at what's happening in the crypto world, we see a Bitcoin right now hovering just above 65,000 and Ethereum hovering at around 3,300. Ether exchange-traded funds have arrived this week. We'll take a closer look at that as well. On the economy, we heard from former New York Fed President William Dudley, a longtime proponent of the need to keep the Fed's benchmark interest rate higher for longer to bring inflation down. But now Dudley's urging his former colleagues to consider a rate cut as soon as the Fed's meeting next week. He wrote in a Bloomberg Opinion op-ed article, Dudley says that he's changed his mind because the facts have changed. He cited a slower labor market, weaker consumer spending, and a rising unemployment rate as reasons for concern, and a cut may not ward off a recession, but that is no reason to delay a move, he wrote in that op-ed article. Meanwhile, another dark cloud on the horizon, commercial real estate banks facing a reckoning over the next 2 years. More than $1 trillion in commercial real estate loans will come due, according to the Conference Board's calculations. Institutions with the most concentrated exposures, insufficient capital cushions, and limited lifelines from larger institutions or regulators face significant losses, according to a Harvard Business Review article. Meanwhile, a deal for the bankrupt Oceanwide Plaza development in downtown Los Angeles, also known as Graffiti Towers, has fallen through for the time being. I'll discuss commercial real estate later this hour with Jerry Sullivan, National Managing Editor of The Real Deal, the authoritative commercial real estate news site. Law enforcement around the world still in shock over what happened a few weekends ago during the attempted assassination of former President Trump, which left one person in the audience dead and 2 others injured. The attempted assassin was also killed. The FBI director has now shed some light on what the gunman did in advance of the shooting. Meanwhile, the Secret Service director, Kimberly Cheadle, has resigned. I'll talk about all that with the Honorable Dennis ZINE, former LA City Council member, longtime LAPD Sergeant, and current LAPD Reserve Officer. Dennis ZINE will be on the line later this hour. But first, on your money, the markets, the economy, and the whole works now. Joining us live, Gabriel Wisdom, Managing Director at American Money Management and author of Wisdom on Value Investing. Gabriel Wisdom, thank you very much for coming to line on this big day here today.
Of course, Frank, it was kind of ugly today, but we need to remember that historically the third quarter of the year, summertime especially, is a seasonally turbulent period for the stock markets, and we saw it today. Add to that the uncertainty that's swirling around the U.S. presidential campaigns, corporate earnings, which clearly Wall Street, nobody actually was impressed with the earnings season so far, the megatech stocks in particular, and then expectations that interest rates are going to go down, perhaps as soon as next week, as you mentioned, the former Fed Governor Dudley suggesting that that's the way to go. I mean, this is indicative of concerns about a recession. And then on top of that, commercial real estate. The cracks in the wall are, I mean, it looks like Humpty Dumpty, and it's quite considerate. And the AI issues around the big tech companies, the kind of money that they're spending, hundreds of billions of dollars, as a matter of fact, those will take years to pan out. Anybody who's used Bing or Microsoft Copilot, well, any sort of question, you're going to find that the answer is somewhat outdated. It's going to take a while for these miraculous things to pan out.
All right. In the meantime, technology is great when it works, and we saw this disaster unfold late last week into the weekend and into this week, impacting the airlines especially, and a lot of retailers and communication systems and so forth. You're a pilot yourself, I know, and know you're watching what's happening with this CrowdStrike meltdown here, where they had that supposedly the software update, which failed, and now companies are still scrambling, especially Delta Airlines in particular. We see CrowdStrike, which is a publicly traded company, down another $11 today after a bit of a rebound yesterday, $258 and change. What's your reaction to all of this and the economic impact we're seeing?
Well, we've seen how just one little glitch like this turns into a worldwide problem. I was flying into Camarillo last weekend, and getting handed off by air traffic control was a problem. They had too many airplanes in the sky, people trying to get wherever they're going because they'd been stuck somewhere. And on top of that, Point Mugu, the federal station that normally hands you off when you pass over Oxnard, was down because of the glitch. Even their phones were down. So this is a very serious kind of problem. It's one of those black swan events. You don't expect to see a swan that has black feathers, but this time we saw one.
And indeed, according to one report I saw today, Delta is facing a $350 million hit from the IT outage that sent the stock down 12% in a month. Delta shares moving lower, and that one. What about the airline names here, and anything else that's been? Even Starbucks was impacted by all this.
You know, Frank, there's never a better time to be a buyer when things go on sale, whether it's the merchandise at Nordstrom's or it's publicly traded companies or even bonds. Nothing is yet on sale, not really. The smaller companies that are more rapidly growing companies, the so-called small caps, have come to life, but that's only because Wall Street institutions, including a lot of money managers, are rotating out of the Magnificent Seven, the big tech names, including companies like CrowdStrike, for obvious reasons, and going into the smaller companies that don't have the same dramatic growth, but are growing nonetheless, and they're priced much more attractively. There's really no such thing as bad investments. There's bad prices. That's what we like to think. And sure enough, the smaller companies have been fairly cheap for too long.
Oh, well, I admire you have a strong stomach to be in this business to begin with, but to endure that uncertainty while you're in the air, to not know this handoff you mentioned and not being able to reach anybody on the phone, that must have been pretty unnerving up there.
eBay Motors is here for the ride. Remember when you first saw the potential? And then through some elbow grease, fresh installs, and a whole lot of love, you transformed 100,000 miles and a body full of rust into a drive that's all your own. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you can make sure your ride stays running smoothly. Brake kits, LED headlights, exhaust kits, turbochargers, bumpers, whatever your baby needs, eBay Motors has it. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, it's guaranteed to fit your ride the first time, every time, or your money back. Plus, at these prices, you're burning rubber, not cash. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. See ebaymotors.com.
Every week, Michael Rosenbaum is getting deep with someone new on the Inside of You podcast.
Let's get inside of Kevin Smith.
I can go to a movie and enjoy it, and I'm never like, I could have done that better.
Really?
Never. I started as a fan. I'll finish as a fan. And the difference between this iteration of Kevin Smith at age 53 and the one that most people met at the beginning of my career, back then, I would have told you all the movies that I hate, and here are the reasons why they suck. And you would never hear that from me today.
Inside of You with Michael Rosenbaum, wherever you listen.
It was actually, and so you go on an air-to-air frequency. All the pilots are talking with each other. You're talking with pilots flying Southwest, United Airlines, and the guy that's just a few miles from you in a Bonanza or a Cirrus or a Cessna.
Isn't that something? Well, thank goodness you made it home safely, and we're all still getting in the aftermath of all this. A lot of loose ends, a lot of rebooting is still going on, so we're following all that closely. What about what's happening with Tesla this week? With the earnings, that stock was down more than $30 today, back to $215. It looked like Elon Musk was in a bad mood on Capitol Hill to begin with, and that's could be one of the reasons. And then Ford on this huge loss in its EV operations, and Fisker was in the news again, the fire sale of all of its vehicles in bankruptcy. What about this EV news we've been getting?
Frank, it's another great example of how the new technologies get ahead of themselves because everybody's excited about them. Tesla's registrations in the state of California are about 24% lower in the second quarter. Registrations of Tesla cars have fallen for the third consecutive quarter in the April to June period. It's not looking great. Now, long term, their battery division, it looks pretty interesting. There have been references to the so-called Trump trade. The Trump trade describes the shift in investor behavior in response to the economic policies and the political motivations associated with a potential Trump presidency. He said that the recent speech that everybody watched at the RNC convention, that he's no fan of electric vehicles. That couldn't have helped.
On the air live with Gabriel Wisdom, Managing Director at American Money Management, based here in Southern California. And we see the Ethereum ETFs have come to reality now after this was expected for some time, but they hit this week. Gabriel Wisdom, this after the Bitcoin ETFs came out earlier this year, and that sent Bitcoin to record highs. Ethereum right now off its recent high down to around 3,300 here. What's your reaction to this latest crypto news?
But pretty interesting, Frank. The U.S. exchange-traded funds that are investing directly in now Ether have seen huge inflows in the first few days of trading, which shows that there's a good deal of interest in owning Ethereum. Is it digital gold? Well, the Bitcoin funds have benefited from that narrative that says that Bitcoin is a digital form of gold, and that's the kind of narrative that Ether just doesn't enjoy. Ether's 85% climb during the digital asset rebound from the crypto winter over the past year does trail Bitcoin, which jumped about 125%, I believe, but still it's significant. The SEC is still on the fence about crypto, but Donald Trump's push to return to the White House might benefit, and J.D. Vance as well. It might benefit crypto-related and token-related digital assets. But it's all very speculative at this point.
Yeah, President Trump scheduled to speak at a Bitcoin conference, and Kamala Harris, who reports yesterday indicated that she might also appear at that Bitcoin conference, apparently will not be appearing at that Bitcoin conference. Going from the blockchain to the gold chain, what about gold here, which has been flirting with record highs right now at around 2,445, silver just below $30 an ounce. What do you see here on the precious metals?
You know, Frank, the cost of mining gold has risen steadily. It's now about $1,300 an ounce just to get gold out of the ground. If you can find it, then you have to mine it. You have to market it, rather, if you're a mining company. And the margin is about $300 to $400 at today's prices. So it's a shortage. Gold and silver and some other semi-precious kinds of metals appear in just about every smartphone in the world. This is an alternative currency. The signs of change, I think, are here. The central banks in recent years have been purchasing gold at really at record levels, including our own central bank. So I certainly wouldn't be a seller.
All right. At this point, Gabriel Wisdom, where are you putting money now and/or taking it off the table?
You know, Frank, the artificial intelligence honeymoon, as far as market valuations, appears to be over. So I'm looking at the laggards that are going to benefit from the ongoing effort by major corporations to automate using artificial intelligence. I'm not talking about NVIDIA, Microsoft, Alphabet, or Apple. I mean, these are all great companies at the right price. When they're at the right prices, they're phenomenal companies. But there's some others. IBM had a good day today. Intel looks very undervalued to me over the long run. Advanced Micro Devices. These are all companies that have exposure to the AI theme, but have failed to keep up with the gains and the enthusiasm of the biggest winners in this space. So I like that. Additionally, I think we're going to need more energy for all of this, and I'm looking very closely at some of the energy companies. My favorite right now that I'm zeroing in on is Sempra, symbol SRE. They're investing in transmission and distribution lines that support data centers, which are critical to all the electric car and AI growth that we're seeing and will see in the future.
All right, before I let you off the hook, one fly in the Chardonnay continues to be commercial real estate. As I mentioned at the beginning of this program, according to a Harvard Business Review survey or study, over the next couple of years, more than $1 trillion in commercial real estate loans will come due, and it looks like some banks could have some difficulty here. Damage could metastasize into a full-blown financial crisis if dozens or even hundreds of small and medium-sized commercial banks fall or fail simultaneously. Give us an update on your view on what's happening on that front, something we've talked about in the past, and we'll be exploring more on specifically on commercial real estate later this hour with Jerry Sullivan, who's a real expert on the ground-level commercial real estate here in Southern California and elsewhere. But what do you see ahead on all that and that important story impacting the economy?
Well, so much for the idea that you can't go wrong investing in brick-and-mortar real estate. You can go very, very wrong. There was a survey by a large national real estate sales company, a brokerage company, that found that 45% of the respondents to their survey have been almost ruined financially by real estate of various kinds. 40% said they'd never invested in the asset class, but some 90% said that 90% of those who had invested said they'd lost money on their investments, and significant amounts of money. The Mortgage Bankers Association announced, what I saw anyway, that about $1 trillion of the $4.7 trillion of outstanding commercial mortgages actually does come due this year. And I hope that data is incorrect, but the Mortgage Bankers Association is pretty realistic, pretty reliable source. One problem today arose with the Blackstone Mortgage Trust. This is a major real estate finance company. They cut their dividend 24% in the face of vacancy-ravaged office spaces and soured loans. So it's not looking good.
Gabriel Wisdom, Managing Director, American Money Management, based here in Southern California, also author of Wisdom on Value Investing. Gabriel, thank you very much for taking the call this afternoon.
Thank you, Frank.
Mottek On Money continues here in 790 KBC. Good afternoon. Rough day for the stock market today. Tech names leading the way lower, including the magnificent one, NVIDIA, taking a hit in all of this today. NVIDIA down more than $8, back to $114 and change. Tesla down more than 30 at $215.99. The Dow down 504 points at the bell today to 39,854. The S&P 500 down 129 at 5,427. And the NASDAQ sliding 655, 17,342. Looks like the NASDAQ having its worst day since 2022. Bitcoin, meanwhile, pulling back after this recent run-up we've seen, up down nearly 300 now, down 290 to 65,378. Ethereum down 48 at 3,326 as Ethereum ETFs getting attention this week. Doge at the moment at 13 cents. The price of gold down just about $19 now at $2,445.20 an ounce. And silver down 28 cents, back below 30 at $29.04 an ounce. Shares of CrowdStrike down again today, down nearly $11 at $258 and change. Delta shares still grappling with that CrowdStrike snafu, down about 60 cents to $42.94 a share. Mottek On Money continues here in 790 KABC. The head of the Secret Service resigned this week following the attempted assassination of former President Trump. Law enforcement around the world and everyone pretty much still reeling over what happened a few weekends ago. The attempted assassination attempt left one person in the audience dead and two others injured. One of the two surviving men who sustained wounds when the gunman opened fire at the Trump rally in Butler, Pennsylvania, has been released now from the hospital, while the other remains in serious but stable condition. The 20-year-old attempted assassin was killed. FBI Director Christopher Wray today testified before the House Judiciary Committee about what information he has, and did shed some new light into what happened there. He said the investigation into the Trump rally shooter has uncovered that he searched about the JFK assassination on the day he registered to attend President Trump's rally on July 13th in Pennsylvania. The weapon crooks used in the attack had a collapsible stock, which the FBI director said could explain why it might not have been easy to for people to observe, although, of course, the gunman was observed on the roof. Apparently, some explosive devices were also found in the gunman's car. Let's bring in the Honorable Dennis ZINE now, former LA City Council member, longtime LAPD sergeant, current LAPD Reserve officer. Dennis ZINE, thanks for coming to the line.
Thank you, Frank. Pleasure to be with you on the line today. And it's another tragedy that we know what happened to former President Trump. And we see the consequences. And the consequences are, when you're the person at the top of the organization, when it comes to security, you're the one who's going to take the blame. And it's interesting that the individual who was at the top was a career member of the United States Secret Service. Kimberly Chello was a career member of the United States Secret Service, and she had many years of service, 24 years of service. She then left, went to Pepsi-Cola, Senior Director of Global Security, did that in 2019, and then she was brought back by our current president, and she's now unemployed because of the tragedy that took place. And what happens is accountability goes to the top. She wasn't directly involved in this particular situation, but she was the one in charge. And when you're in charge and something goes wrong, in this particular case, we have individuals who were killed and injured, etc., and it's the person running for president of the United States, there's consequences. And I saw the grilling that she took when she was before testifying. And then after that, it was like, I'm done. And she resigned. If she hadn't resigned, I'm sure with the temperament in Washington, she would have been terminated. But she had a career in service to this country, and I commend her for that. But the circumstances just brought about her departure, and she resigned before she got fired. But I think ultimately, with what happened in Washington, D.C., she would have been terminated from this position. But again, a career employee who did 24 years with the United States Secret Service. And this is the consequence. The accountability goes to the person at the top. While she wasn't directly involved, She was the supervisor. And when you're the supervisor and something goes haywire, they're going to hold you accountable, and it's exactly what happened. And she lost her position with the United States Secret Service.
Of course.
The Rolling Stone Music Now podcast gets inside the biggest stories with Rolling Stone senior writer Brian Hyatt, Snoop Dogg, and Lotto.
Let me give you one of my secrets. I remain the biggest kid in the room at all times. As a kid, and you can't believe that. Look at where you at. Keep making it about fun.
Yeah, we blessed to be able to do a job that's like fun.
There's two funds that's the most important funds in the world. Funds that you make off of the fun that you have.
Rolling Stone Music Now, wherever you listen.
Pretty much bipartisan anger expressed during that hearing you referenced, where one of the representatives said she should go back to guarding Cheetos. She previously, after her service with the Secret Service, went into the private sector, worked for PepsiCo, which makes Cheetos and other snack foods, as well as the soda, of course. And so there was some real anger there expressed on both sides of the aisle.
Well, you're going to see that in the political environment. They're going to have to point the finger at someone. And while the Secret Service was ultimately responsible for security when candidates run for those offices, it comes down to the Secret Service. They're responsible. Now, the other agencies, the state agencies, the local police, et cetera, they're also part of it. But ultimate responsibility rests with that lead agency. And whether they needed more observation and drones, whatever they needed, they didn't have. And subsequently, we see the tragedy that took place where presidential candidate Donald Trump, he could have died. I mean, that was so close to death with that bullet and multiple bullets that were fired. And then they'll do extensive research into find out why would this young individual, this young assailant, why would he do this? What prompted him to do this? What prompted him in his life to do such a tragic shooting of a situation in politics? And obviously, we've seen it happen in the past. But why would someone that age resort to this? But again, why she's gone is because she was the person at the top. And it was interesting that her position there was a very secure position. And when you saw the hearings take place, she was the one who was being grilled and grilled extensively. And I think she saw the writing on the wall. It says, I'm out of here and retire again. And maybe she'll go back into private practice. But again, I commend her for the time that she did. Many years, 24 years in security with the United States Secret Service. That's a commendable career, but it ends with a lot of embarrassment and a lot of shame.
In light of what happened, certainly, and people are wondering, how did this punk basically pull this off? A lot of people, after seeing all the videos, came to the conclusion that that he was basically allowed on the roof. He was allowed to take the shots and then was taken out, so he couldn't talk about it afterwards. So some serious questions are being asked today. The FBI director was in the hot seat and shed some more light, some more details. Looks like he also had some explosives in his vehicle and did these Google searches of previous assassinations and so forth. Based on what we know at this point, Dennis Zine, what is your assessment of this epic security failure there?
Well, it's an epic failure. There's no question about it. And the United States Secret Service will regroup. They'll do whatever they need to do. They have an interim director who came from law enforcement. He was a police officer in Florida. He's now the interim director of the Secret Service. But what happens is they'll do extensive research. Many organizations will get involved, federal, state, local, and they'll come up, where did they fail? And where they failed was not making sure it was an adequate, secure environment. And that's why when they like to do these rallies, they like to be inside. When you're inside a facility, you can check everything from the rafters down to the basement. You have that capacity. But when you're outside, then the elements. That's the problem, is the elements are there. And as we saw what happened in this tragedy, that was an opportunity for someone to take something that was very precious, our freedom, our liberty, and try to destroy it. So what they're going to do now, I don't think you're going to see any outdoor events. I think they're all going to be indoors, just because of the security measures and how they have to establish those security members. And they were prone to attack, and that's exactly what happened. So we're going to see it happen between now and the election. You're going to see them tighten up security, and I think you'll see rallies held inside auditoriums or facilities. I don't think you're going to see anything outside.
Yeah, I have to say your law enforcement experience next to hers is it was pretty much double, right? 56 years and counting for the city of Los Angeles as a law enforcement officer as well as city council member. So we always appreciate your accurate assessment of things here. But have you ever seen a situation where police say he's got a gun, he's on the roof? You know, I'm sure you've been out in the field where people have reported something to you. You know, if you heard that, how would you respond to that?
Well, you jump on the radio immediately and you alert everyone that there's an individual at this particular site and what you observe, and alert everyone. And then you respond to that as quickly as possible. Would you want to put out a radio broadcast of what they find? In addition to radio broadcasts, let me mention, I don't know if your listeners are aware, but the Los Angeles Police Department is sending Los Angeles Police Reserve officers to Paris for the Olympics. There's a contingent of LAPD Reserve officers going to be providing security in Paris, France, for the Olympics. It's how broad the Los Angeles Police Department goes, where they're sending them to help security, bringing in mass security for the Olympics that are going to start in a couple of days. So what happens is when you're in law enforcement, you got to communicate, you got to be aware, and you got to be on your toes to make sure that you protect people, protect and serve. That's the motto. And sadly, in this particular case, this rally did not provide the protection and safety that law enforcement is proud to provide. It didn't happen. It failed in Pennsylvania.
Thank you for your assessment. As always, brutal assessment as needed. Dennis ZINE, thank you very much for joining us live here, and look forward to many more conversations, as we always appreciate having Dennis ZINE on the line. That is the Honorable Dennis ZINE, former Los Angeles City Council member, longtime LAPD sergeant, current LAPD Reserve officer. Are we going to be speaking to you from Paris, Dennis? Are you heading over there too?
Frank, I'm not going. I'm going to be watching on TV.
Okay.
I am not going to Paris. Thank you.
All right. Well, we'll get you back on the line sooner rather than later then. Thank you very much for taking the call today. Mottek On Money continues here at 790 KABC. Graffiti Towers back in the spotlight. The bankrupt Oceanwide Plaza development, also known as Graffiti Towers, right across from Crypto.com Arena in downtown Los Angeles, is back in the spotlight after a deal apparently fell through to take over that place in a bankruptcy proceeding. Let's bring in Jerry Sullivan now, National Managing Editor of The Real Deal, the authoritative commercial real estate news site. Jerry Sullivan, thanks very much for coming to the line here.
Oh, thank you, Frank. It's good to be with you.
Yeah, give us an update on what's happening with Graffiti Towers here, first of all.
Well, once again, our West Coast Bureau Chief Bellafar is ahead of the game on this, and she broke the story that what had been reported as a stalking horse bid of $500 million for the Oceanwide Plaza has fallen through. The bidder never was identified. And so that kind of takes it back to the drawing board on the marketing, and we'll see where it goes from here.
All right. So how does it work in a bankruptcy proceeding? And maybe you can explain this stalking horse term here, that somebody in the bankruptcy proceeding was ready to put up some money and be first in line to possibly take it over. Is that how it works?
Yeah, and it's essentially almost setting a floor. Minimum bid, I guess, would be the equivalent of it. So you have, ostensibly, you have someone who says, I will go this much, and then you open it up to auction. And so that was there. It's a matter of negotiations. What sort of commitment comes with that? You know, is there some sort of earnest money or anything like that? And in this case, it doesn't seem to be that there was any. And the unidentified bidder walked away, apparently. It's been a little odd. Even the coverage has been a little odd. I thought the Wall Street Journal did a very big piece about this apparent stalking horse bid. Never identified the bidder. Nobody ever, shed any light on that. And the whole thing looks a little bit odd, as this building has kind of been an oddity for some time now.
Right. So now, where do things stand now? So there will be an auction. Is that the plan now in September? Is that right?
The plan now is an auction. The seller, Oceanwide, a Chinese developer, Oceanwide Holdings, I think it's called. They're in bankruptcy, so the plan is to auction it. They now are requesting a breakup fee be attached to it. And so that would mean that if you were the stalking horse and you put in the bid and a better bid came in, right, you would get some fee in recompense. Your bid would be set to the side. They'd go with the higher bid, but you would get a fee. I think they're looking for a 2.5%, so that would be about $12 million. The judge in the case didn't seem real inclined to do that. So, we'll see. Again, everything about this looks just a little off kilter to me.
Yep. Jerry Sullivan is on the line with us live, national managing editor of The Real Deal, the authoritative commercial real estate news site. And I don't know if you saw the Harvard Business Review article. Looks like there are concerns about what's happening in commercial real estate as banks face a reckoning over the next couple of years. More than $1 trillion in commercial real estate loans will come due, and looks like some of the places here in the Los Angeles area still on shaky ground. Give us your overview of what's happening on the commercial real estate scene here.
Well, call it the Great Reset, because values are going to have to be reset. Some of them are going to, just have to go bust, and either, somebody buys them out of bankruptcy. We're going to see a wave of distress, which will bring the prices down, which brings the basis down. And so if you buy a building at a low enough basis, maybe you can convert it. You can certainly offer lower rents and maybe restock. And then are you talking about a different sort of tenant base for downtown Los Angeles? All those things. It will be a comprehensive reset for Los Angeles and markets across the country. And, just to illustrate it, Frank, another story we just broke was the Brookfield had the building at 777 South Fig. And, by any measure, is a Class A downtown high-rise 52-story office building. And it just sold for $120 a square foot. Okay. A year ago, it was $240 a square foot average downtown. Before the pandemic, it was more than $500 a square foot. So you're at about 1/5. Or that building, and I would say that building is representative of Class A downtown office space, at about 1/5 of what the average was for its comps in the downtown area pre-pandemic. So, it's a different world, and there's a lot to work out.
Yeah, I see. I'm looking at therealdeal.com right now. Your website, a Chinese investor buys a Brookfield 777 tower in downtown LA for $120 million, along with the other latest news here. And I see Yamashiro's up for sale, too. That's a landmark property in Hollywood. And what about the formerly the Hollywood Highland Complex, Ovation Hollywood? Also, they had that big renovation there where they converted some of the retail into office, probably at the worst time ever coming out of the pandemic. It's office that's suffering the most, right? Anything else that's getting your attention?
I mean, that's a pretty good rundown. Again, we've talked before. Century City seems to be a strong point. There's a couple others. I think Glendale does a little better than other areas. I think downtown LA's office market remains a real big question mark. And, we'll just have to see where it goes. I noticed that I think it's Suzanne Hawley with the Downtown LA Alliance and the coverage of this Oceanwide Plaza referred to it as, it's kind of dismissed it as a superficial problem. I don't know that that's a superficial problem. You have a giant unfinished 3-tower project covered with graffiti in the middle of your downtown with, the Olympics a couple of years off. I wouldn't call it a superficial problem. People are going to have to really square up on this and start to realize.
Right, you are, Jerry. With all the more reason to thank you very much for coming to the line. We'll keep the line open to you. Jerry Sullivan, National Managing Editor of The Real Deal, the authoritative commercial real estate news site, therealdeal.com. Thank you very much for joining us live here. This is Mottek On Money on 790 KABC.
It's kickoff time, and Believe podcasts are here to get you ready for the season.
This team, they looked to figure it out, and they said, okay, we got a shot at this thing.
With Believe, you get immediate reactions, game previews, and expert analysis from all 32 teams, plus all of your favorite college teams.
This is a true junior that we're talking about.
Sideline to sideline, end zone to end zone.
The running was good. His size is unbelievable.
Just search Believe. That's BLEAV podcast, wherever you listen.